My special guest in studio, Jean Pastula, who is an expert on saving money, not only for retirement, tax-advantaged ways to save, ensuring your financial future. Jean, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, so a lot of people are going to be upset at me by saying what I just said and I'm about to say, but I'm tired of it. I'm tired of us as a society blaming the government on everything. We blame the school system because our kids are fat, okay, because of the lunches, and we blame the little quarter machines that they can buy candy bars in. We blame everybody for everything except, and speaking as a fat guy, I know there are things that you can do about it. I watch that commercial all the time with Marie Osmond, you know, and Dan Marino and all that stuff. You've seen it. There are things you can do. But let's talk about this for just a minute. Investment news. Retirement crisis is real, Gino, and getting worse. More than half of U.S. households don't have enough saved for retirement, according to the Center for American Progress. And they claim it's getting worse. Along with tracking, here's what they said, what people are putting away for retirement, the researchers looked at dozens of studies by government, academic, and private sector organizations that model how likely people are to fall short when they retire. The most convincing estimates project that more than 50% of households will fall short, and even the most optimistic studies predict that nearly 1/4 of retirees will, in fact, fall short. As of 2013, the top 20% of working age households by income held 67.7% of all retirement assets. Roughly 31% of Americans have no retirement savings and no access to defined benefit plans. Of course, you know where they're going. This must mean we need new regulation to force more companies into putting money away for retirement, to force companies to set up the My IRA program that Barack Obama introduced last year at his State of the Union, a complete waste of time. This is all about putting the onus on the taxpayer, at least that taxpayer that pays taxes, against those that don't make enough money to save for their own retirement. Now, I think we all have to admit there are people that are indigent, that don't have money, that really do need a hand up, but not a hand out. And for those, our hearts bleed, and certainly we donate to charities and the soup kitchens and all that stuff. We need to help those that need the help. But a person that, you know, is making $25,000, $35,000, $45,000 a year should be able to live on less money. Get a second job. I've done it. You've done it. And I know it sounds sort of mean and crass, but it's not. It's not, because you start out with a low-paying job and you work your butt off to get the next higher-paying job and the next higher-paying job. I remember, Gene, when I was a youngster, I was 24, just starting to have babies. And of course, in my case, when we have babies, we had babies because we popped out 4 in 4 years. And I literally worked 3 jobs at the same time because none of them paid very much money. One job was school teacher. At the time it was like $8,000. The next job was musician. I don't know what I made, you know, 35, 50 bucks a night on tips and whatever. And the other one was driver training. I think I was making $5 or $6 an hour, putting my life in jeopardy, teaching teenagers how to drive. And you added it all up, and we still fell short every month. And I was getting up at, you know, I played in a band till 2 o'clock in the morning, getting up at 6 to go teach school and summer school and all that stuff. And it seems like so many Americans still do that, and we have great respect for them. But we have so many government programs now that a lot of people just say, you know what, it's a lot easier to get my earned income tax credit and collect on the welfare benefits, et cetera, than get that second job. Am I being like really bad here? Am I going to get a ton of emails?
you may get a ton of emails, but I think you're right on. I mean, when you said originally that we're more and more we're blaming the government for not having enough money in retirement or what have you, and I'm thinking, yeah, well, if we get the government out of it, then we won't have them to blame, and we'll have to take care of it ourselves. When I started in the business, I remember learning the statistic. This was back in late 60s, early 70s, that 92% of Americans over the age of 65 did not have enough money to retire on. At 92%.
So it hasn't changed, what you're telling me.
Exactly. It's exactly right. I mean, that has stuck with me, and of course at the time, I'm going into the business of helping people. I'm thinking, I ain't going to be one of those 92%,
right.
And so I've made sure that I'm not. But it is interesting, and what is fascinating to me is that for the people who do have money, that have accumulated at least enough to start arranging it so that they can, provide an income for themselves in retirement, and people with even more. The institutions that are utilized or promoted to help them, the securities business and the banks and all the rest of the stuff, and the media, they all leave out the one institution that is their total business, is helping people take care of themselves. And of course, I'm alluding to the insurance business. And
well, that's true.
It's amazing that the one institution that can really do the job, and if it would get some help in promotion from the media and financial advisors and all the rest, it would certainly provide a good foundation and an opportunity for a lot of people to accumulate at least a basis for their retirement, and add that to the Social Security programs that we have. We wouldn't have anywhere near this problem.
So David Ning writes this article, living on $34.01 a week. And I don't want to get into the article except that, he unplugged his computers and turned off the TV and turned off the lights and all the stuff that we take for granted. And, he saved some, $25 here, $50 there. Hey, Dave, can you look on my desk, please, and grab the Derek Poland's book? All right, this guy wrote a great book that he sent me, and I'm going to order a bunch of them to send out to a lot of our viewers and listeners, because it's great stuff to help our younger people understand that you can get there from here if you're just disciplined, if you just do it. But here's what he says, what I learned in taking a week and living on $34. That doesn't include his mortgage payment, but it includes his other bills per se. What I learned, you are using more than you really need. This further strengthens, he says, his belief that the majority of people who think they can't cut back are probably not looking hard enough. Next, it's not as bad as you think. Knowing, he says, that I can live just as happily with no extras will allow me to control my desire to splurge, and it can be done. The message that stuck me the most, he says, was that it can be done. I can actually practice extreme frugality and still be comfortable and happy. I'm not recommending that you practice anything extreme. I'm just saying that we need to take personal responsibility as parents to teach our kids that being frugal is okay, because it could mean the difference between retiring someday or living off of the government. We'll be back with Gene Pastula from Safe Money Monitor. That's safemoneymonitor.com. Don't go away. I received a book from a fellow by the name of Derek Poland, who's in Minnesota. He signed it for me and everything. And I don't get too excited about this stuff. But he wrote me a really nice email. And I said, well, send me a book. I'll be happy to read it. And he's not an endorser. He's not a sponsor. But I read through it. I read every page of it. And I'm like the least person in America to want to penny pinch or try to save money. I hated that. I told my wife before we got married, I said, whatever you do, don't be a penny pincher, because I can't stand that. And I really couldn't at the time. But I also said, because I went to a Charlie Tremendous Jones workshop one time, and he said, I want you to go home and tell your wife that she can't spend more money than you can make. I was, of course, in sales. And I went home and I said, honey, you can't spend more than I can make. And, well, let's just say she had her credit card stolen last Christmas, and I didn't report them stolen because the guy that took them spends less money than her. Whoa. In either event, I found this book really, really interesting. And if you email me right now, you send an email, raylucia.com, RAYLUCIA.com, you can pass this book along to your kids, your grandkids, or probably use it yourself because he's got 40 different ways to save money. And I looked through it and I said, you know what? I could probably come up with an extra $500 or $1,000 a month if I just had the discipline to do what this guy is saying to do. So I just had Bobby order some books for me, but it's today, this is one day only, because I've been talking about this. I want you to pass this book along to somebody that can use it so that they're not going to be dependent on the government, which, by the way, is that they're dependent on the government or are they dependent on you and me as taxpayers? Welcome back, Gene Pastula. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a great idea.
You know what?
If nothing else, you read the book and you'll feel guilty the rest of your life.
Well, that's right. That's the way us Catholics are. I don't know about you.
That's why I don't use diets, man. I always feel guilty.
All right, let's move on to the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal says, don't spend old age pinching pennies. This is Jonathan Clements, who, by the way, I had a conversation with years ago when I wrote my first book, and he wasn't very nice to me. I wasn't a published author at the time. This was my first book. Anyway, it's neither here nor there, but he's a good writer. He really is. He says, half of us need to make serious financial changes or won't be able to maintain our standard of living. According to the National Retirement Risk Index created by Boston College's Center for Retirement Research, 52% of households will see their standards of living fall if they opt to retire at 65, up from 30% in 1989. So obviously, retirement getting tougher and tougher. So he goes through this whole article and he says, okay, so what should you do? So let me go through what Jonathan, a very smart guy, had to say about what you should do. Number one, he says, work longer. I agree. What's the matter with that? If life expectancy has gone up, 100 days for every 300 days we've been alive since we've been alive, then it would only stand to reason that you ought to be able to work a few extra years longer if you're going to live a few extra years longer. So why not? Why does age 65 or age 62 have to resonate as retirement age when actually you get the most from your Social Security benefits at age 70, which, by the way, has got to be one of those items on this list, postpone taking your Social Security. That goes with working longer. Number two, Gene, you'll be interested in this. He says, buy a lifetime annuity. So once again, he's a financial writer. Why would a financial writer be writing about buying a lifetime annuity? I thought all financial writers hated your industry.
Obviously not all of them. And those financial writers, if you will, at Harvard, is it? No, it's not Harvard.
Wharton.
Horton, that's it.
Wharton Financial
School,
Institution
yes,
Center, yeah.
That have done several studies on these all agree that, and now the government is actually getting on board with this by allowing people to put some of their money in an IRA into an annuity and not utilize that balance as part of their required minimum distributions.
Yeah, the so-called qualified longevity annuity contracts, the QLACs, as we now call them in the biz. QLAC. And again, the government has actually been encouraging 401k plans, and I think in the last several weeks they've come out with final rulings on all this stuff, allowing target date funds, in fact, to introduce qualified lifetime annuity contracts as part of the target date fund, because they know that annuitizing income will take the government more off the hook. We can't afford it as a society to put everybody on the dole. And we've already got, I don't know how many millions and millions of people, 50 million people on food stamps and so forth. Think about the baby boomers retiring if they can't retire with enough money, and they start tapping into the Social Security system early, they start tapping into the Medicaid system, sooner or later, we're Greece. So we've got to encourage people to have some money in guaranteed lifetime income annuities.
Social Security is a guaranteed income lifetime annuity.
It is indeed.
And most pensions, all pensions, quite frankly, by definition, are guaranteed lifetime income annuities. Problem is, these days, what we used to have at retirement, in addition to the gold watch, was our pension that was a guaranteed lifetime annuity. And now that has been changed in the last, over the last 25, 30 years into a 401k or an IRA, where we basically put our own money in on a tax-favored basis and create a lump sum of money at retirement. What do you do with that money? You know, an annuity, a commercial annuity, is a product that allows the individual to spend all of the capital that he's invested and all of the interest that it earns while he's doing that to provide him an income for the rest of his life. And if he runs out of money, the institution of the insurance company kicks in and continues it. The most efficient way to generate income from your personal capital, to get the most out of it, is to be able to spend the last penny on the day you die.
You know, what's really interesting, and I love that, what's interesting, and as you know, I've studied this stuff almost as much as you have, the Financial Research Corporation did this study once, because one of my concerns as an advisor, when I was doing advising, I would say, well, because I was a stock and bond jockey, and I grew up in the insurance business, but over time, I thought I got a lot more sophisticated than you. You stayed in the insurance business. Anyway, I said, well, yeah, but that lifetime income annuity is actually going to rob my heirs of money. What they determined is, say, a 30 to 50% allocation of one's retirement assets to, say, it's a 30% allocation in lieu of bonds, and then taking the other 70% and putting it into a more aggressive portfolio mix like stocks, actually produced a higher income and left the heirs richer than had you not bought the annuity at all. Once again, be careful what you hear, be careful what you read, be careful what you see, because sometimes what you hear, see, and read ain't true. Tune into the Ray Lucia Show. We'll be back in a couple minutes. Don't go away. Back in studio, Gene Pastula. One thing that you don't buy into as a guy that comes from the insurance side of the house, you don't like trading, you don't like leverage, you don't like debt, you don't like fancy ways to try to generate more return, because I don't know about more times than not, but some of the times, especially in times like these, when people from Vanguard and others are warning against it, people get burned, and once they get burned, they have a hard time getting back into being an investor.
Yeah, as you were going through that list, I was thinking, that's pretty good. Yeah, I do that. But then you put the caveat on the end about, to make a better return, not so much. On the other hand, there is leverage that I espouse and that I sell every day from insurance contracts. I mean, that's good leverage, because you know exactly what it is that you're going to end up with and under what circumstances.
That would be true, but with a life insurance policy, a deferred annuity,
right,
that sort of thing.
Exactly.
You get a written, guaranteed contract that says, it could be better, but at the very worst, this is what we will deliver on this date.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, in my own, and I have a stock portfolio. I mean, I have assets in the market and what have you. But as I'm listening to you and obviously clicking through what I'm doing, my percentage has gone way down from what it was as far as how much of it is actually invested versus just sitting in a in a cash account or someplace that is just getting a little interest and not subject to market risk. And it's done that over the last 18 months. That's just me. But what's interesting, and I was mentioning to you earlier that I was involved with a group of financial planners yesterday at one of their conferences, and I see that they're all learning, they're all being told this, but you don't get the feeling there's a big shift in what they're doing with their clients as far as shifting into safer instruments. Maybe they're going a little bit up market in from mid cap to blue chip or something of that nature, and that that makes them feel like they're hunkering down for what would happen. But we are in a very unique situation right now, and it's important, particularly for people who are about to retire or who are already early in their retirement, to create their portfolio in a way that provides a really good guaranteed base to take care of the financial risks that they face.
Let me read from this article because I think you'll find this interesting. It's from Investment News. Vanguard warns advisors on stock risk in client portfolios. And I'm reading through this, and I found this paragraph somewhat interesting. Many advisors, they say, seek to rebalance portfolios after price increases, in this case, cashing in some stock fund shares and buying bonds. But investors may be reluctant to do so this time because of a widely predicted rise in near zero U.S. interest rates. That increase could erode the value of some bonds. A number of analysts and advisors are recommending more exotic bond strategies, stock strategies, and alternatives to manage that risk. I'm saying to myself while I'm reading that, you don't have to get exotic, because with exotic comes added risk. Exotic would indicate leverage. Exotic would indicate lower credit quality. But they're obviously concerned that if you stick with quality bonds and interest rates go up, you're going to get hammered on your price, and if you sell, you'll get hosed. But you happen to represent the Safe Money Monitor. You monitor all of these, I don't know about all, but a lot of fixed annuities and fixed index annuities. Why don't they talk about in these articles a fixed annuity or a fixed indexed annuity contract in the context of a bond alternative?
The real reason is because what they know about these products and the context in which they've learned them make them a separate purchase for a specific reason. Annuities, obviously, to get a annuity income someday. And they don't understand them, or they might, but they don't think in terms when they're putting out stuff like that about the fact that how it relates to other financial instruments. And we've been talking for years about the fact that if you have a 5%, and this is going back several years when this was the rates, you have a 5% bond portfolio that you have a risk of needing the money when interest rates went up and the value went down. You could get a 5% annuity portfolio for the same thing, and you don't have that market risk in those kinds of instruments.
Here's what a lot of people say.
The insurance company takes that market risk.
I get that, but here's what people say, and it's not true. But I can't get to my money, and we have found. In fact, I was speaking with my good friend Brian. You know Brian. We had lunch the other day. So Brian, who was a young man once upon a time that worked for me, who's gone off and he's basically in your business now, and I asked him about one of the annuity contracts out there, and he said, liquidity-wise, you can get 10% per year of the actual premium. So if you put $100,000 in, you could take 10% out each year, get all your money back in 10 years, let's say, plus the interest, and the interest could be credited based on how well the stock market does anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what they're really talking about as far as the liquidity is, it's not that it isn't liquid. I mean, you can get the money back, but in the early years, there's typically what they call a surrender charge. Well, you know what? You have a surrender charge potential in a bond as well. If the time you want your money is the time when the bond value is down 10%, and you need to take it, you got a 10% surrender charge. And that can go on forever. In an annuity, you know exactly how much that's going to be and for how long. And it usually starts around 5 or 6 in a quality annuity in the first year and reduces to 0 in 5 or 6 or 7 years. So the fact that it costs you a little bit to get all of your money back in the early years is really an insignificant thing in most situations.
But for individuals right now that are subscribing to some kind of a bucket concept or whatever, can actually take money, put it into a short-term instrument, get an interest rate that, let's say, last year would have probably generated an 8% or a 7% rate of return on the portfolio on a fixed basis because of the way interest rates are calculated on these annuities, and still be able to gain access to 10% of your money if you need to spend it, and you can do that over the next 5, 6 years. After 5 or 6 years, all the money's liquid anyway.
Based on when you do this and the kind of contract you have, you're exactly right.
You hear what he just said? I'm exactly right. We'll take a break on that note. We'll be back. The Ray Lucia Show. By the way, before the break, I was making up a hypothetical return from like the past. If this stock market, for example, what was it in 2013, did like 30%, if you had one of these indexed contracts, Gino, you would have probably earned a good double-digit return in a very safe environment. And if the market went down 13%, you'd earn 0 on your money. So that's the way they work. There's no downside risk, but you're obviously not going to get all of the upside. That's the trade-off. But for a person that's comparing it to a bond that could obviously lose money when interest rates go up, you can't lose money. If interest rates go up, that usually portends that the stock market is going up. And if your contract is indexed somehow, at least in part, to the stock market, that part would also likely to go up, subject to some cap in the returns or some spread where the insurance company takes a little bite out of the apple. That's the way it works, right?
That's exactly right, yes.
So I don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that the insurance companies have, because I've heard guys do this, that, you know, they have some phenomenal way to get 8% when everybody else on the planet's getting 0.8%. It's not true. But there are sophisticated trading techniques that if you have as much money as the insurance company has, they can go out and buy these longer-term expiration options. And I don't want to get in the weeds on this stuff, but they can do it a lot more efficiently and inexpensively than the average person like you and me can do it. And it can get you a fixed rate of return that's actually quite competitive. And if you go back to the Wharton study that Gene Pastula alluded to, I think they called it, let me think, real world index annuities, and you read the very, very boring report, which I have read cover to cover at least once, you will see that in their comments and in their executive summary, they say fixed indexed annuities have produced returns that are competitive with stock and bond accounts. I wish they didn't say stock accounts, because that is not what you should be buying these for. They should be bond, CD, safe money alternatives. They are savings plans. They are not investments. How did I do from a compliance
You did great. And I would just add that from an income perspective, when you have individuals in the late 70s or early 80s who are finding that their assets are not keeping up with inflation or their needs, and are trying to find a way of getting more income out of their assets, those people can in fact get 7, 8, 9% income on a fixed life annuity.
Distribution.
Yes, exactly. Income, not accumulation. But you know, my mother is 92 years old, and she has a sum of money that that if we need to increase her income because of the place where she's living is getting the rents up too high, and she lives in a retirement facility, very nice one. We can get in there and get 12% a year, actually closer to 13% a year income off of a portion of her money. So we don't have to go and like find a different, better bond or a different. What was that clever? No, you were talking about the way we can do the income to get more out of it was more risky in the last segment. I don't know.
The leveraged closed-end fund.
Well, whatever. Anyway, you get creative in the marketplace, and you can do better things. But obviously, it involves more risk and complexity and the like. Annuities don't have to be that complex.
Listen, folks, you can get more information on all the stuff we've talked about today from Gene, his company, SafeMoneyMonitor.com. That's what he does. He monitors all of these different alternatives and can work with you one-on-one personally, or he's got a staff. His staff is smarter than him. So I suspect if you're talking in this arena, you'd refer him over to Josh or Tim or somebody who
really knows their stuff. Yeah, that's right.
Or the linked benefits plan that we've talked about many times in this program, basically taking your emergency funds money and moving it from one pocket to the next, still giving you an emergency fund, but also giving you a long-term care benefit at a very, very, very low cost. So go to SafeMoneyMonitor.com.